In the annals of history, certain figures emerge whose lives seem destined to shape the very course of nations. Their stories are not merely biographical accounts, but epic sagas, woven into the fabric of the lands they helped forge. Such is the tale of a man born not to royalty but to the soil of a new world, a man whose destiny would intertwine with the birth of a republic and whose legacy would be etched into the very foundations of liberty. This is the story of George Washington, a figure of monumental significance, a leader forged in the crucible of revolution, and the indispensable man who would become the first president of the United States. His journey from a Virginia planter to the father of a nation is a testament to the power of character, resolve, and an unwavering commitment to the ideals of freedom. On February 22, 1732, in the pastoral landscape of Westmoreland County, Virginia, a son was born to Augustine and Mary Ball Washington. They named him George. His birthplace, a modest tobacco plantation known as Pope's Creek, was nestled within the British colony of Virginia, a world away from the European centers of power. Young Washington's early life was shaped by the rhythms of colonial agriculture and the social structures of the Virginia gentry. He was not afforded the formal European education that some of his contemporaries received. Instead, his learning was practical, centered on mathematics, land surveying, and the codes of conduct befitting a gentleman of his station. The death of his father when George was only 11 years old dramatically altered the course of his young life, placing him under the guardianship of his older half-brother, Lawrence. It was Lawrence who would introduce him to the influential Fairfax family, opening doors to a world of political and social connections that would prove invaluable. Through these connections, the young ambitious Washington embarked on a career as a professional surveyor, a profession that not only provided him with an income, but also gave him an intimate and unparalleled knowledge of the vast, untamed western frontier. This early experience in the wilderness would instill in him a resilience, a strategic mind, and a deep appreciation for the immense potential of the American continent, qualities that would later define his military and political leadership. As tensions between the British and French empires escalated over control of the Ohio Valley, a young and relatively inexperienced George Washington was thrust onto the world stage. In 1753, at the tender age of 21, he was dispatched by Virginia's Governor Dinwiddie on a perilous mission to deliver a British ultimatum to the French forces encroaching on territory claimed by the British Crown. His journey through the unforgiving winter wilderness was fraught with danger, a true test of his endurance and courage. Though the French politely rebuffed the ultimatum, Washington's detailed account of the expedition, published upon his return, brought him his first measure of public recognition. The following year now, a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia Regiment, he led a small force to construct a fort at the forks of the Ohio River, an action that precipitated the first shots of what would become the French and Indian War, a global conflict known as the 7 Years' War. His early command was marked by both bravery and blunders, most notably the skirmish at Jumonville Glen and his subsequent surrender at the hastily constructed Fort Necessity. Despite these initial setbacks, his resolve did not waver. He later served as a senior aide to the British General Edward Braddock, miraculously surviving the disastrous Battle of the Monongahela, where he displayed immense courage under fire, rallying the retreating troops. For the remainder of the war, he commanded the Virginia Regiment, tasked with the monumental challenge of defending a vast and vulnerable frontier. This grueling military apprenticeship was his crucible, forging a seasoned and pragmatic leader, teaching him invaluable lessons in command, logistics, and the complexities of wilderness warfare that would prove indispensable in the greater conflict yet to come. Following the conclusion of the French and Indian War, Washington resigned his commission and returned to the life of a Virginia planter, a role he cherished. Through his marriage to the wealthy widow Martha Dandridge Custis, he became one of the wealthiest men in Virginia, assuming control of the vast Mount Vernon estate. For the next decade and a half, he dedicated himself to agricultural innovation, land speculation, and his duties as a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses. He was a man of his time and class, a slaveholder who managed a large plantation dependent on enslaved labor, a complex and undeniable part of his life that modern scholarship continues to grapple with. Yet, as a legislator, he became increasingly disillusioned with British colonial policy. He witnessed firsthand the Crown's growing encroachment on colonial liberties, from the Proclamation of 1763, which restricted westward expansion, to a series of punitive tax measures like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. Washington, initially a moderate, evolved into a staunch opponent of what he viewed as British tyranny. He embraced non-importation agreements and voiced his support for colonial rights, believing that the British Parliament had no authority to tax the colonies without their consent. His transformation from a loyal British subject to a revolutionary patriot was gradual but resolute. When the First Continental Congress convened in 1774 to formulate a unified colonial response to the Intolerable Acts, Virginia sent Washington as one of its delegates, a clear sign of his esteemed position among the leaders of the burgeoning resistance. When the simmering tensions between the colonies and Great Britain finally erupted into open conflict at Lexington and Concord in April 1775, the Second Continental Congress faced the daunting task of organizing a unified military effort. They needed a commander-in-chief, a leader who could unite the disparate colonial militias into a cohesive fighting force, the Continental Army. The choice fell upon George Washington. His military experience, his commanding presence, and his status as a prominent Virginian, which helped to secure the crucial support of the Southern colonies, made him the ideal candidate. On June 15, 1775, he accepted the commission, famously declaring that he did not feel himself equal to the command he was honored with. He embarked on a war that would last 8 arduous years, a revolutionary struggle against the most powerful military force on Earth. The war was a saga of immense hardship and improbable triumphs. Washington faced monumental challenges: a chronic lack of funding, poorly supplied and trained soldiers, rampant disease, and the constant threat of mutiny. He endured the crushing defeat at the Battle of Long Island, the humiliating loss of New York City, and the brutal winter encampment at Valley Forge, where his army was pushed to the brink of collapse. Yet, through it all, Washington's leadership was the glue that held the Patriot cause together. His strategic daring was showcased in the audacious crossing of the Delaware River on Christmas night 1776, leading to a stunning surprise victory at Trenton that revitalized American morale. He demonstrated remarkable resilience, holding the army together through its darkest hours. His masterstroke came at Yorktown in 1781, where, in a brilliantly executed joint operation with French land and naval forces, he trapped and forced the surrender of General Cornwallis's army, effectively ending the war and securing American independence. Washington's perseverance, strategic vision, and unwavering resolve were the indispensable elements that led a fledgling nation to victory against a global superpower. With independence won, Washington once again yearned for the tranquility of his Mount Vernon estate. In a move that stunned the world, particularly the monarchical powers of Europe, he resigned his commission as commander-in-chief before the Congress of the Confederation in December 1783. This voluntary relinquishment of power was a profound statement, establishing the principle of civilian control over the military, a cornerstone of the new republic. However, the nation he had fought to create was floundering. The Articles of Confederation, the country's first governing document, had created a weak central government incapable of addressing the pressing economic and political challenges of the post-war era. Shays' rebellion in Massachusetts highlighted the fragility of the new nation and the urgent need for a stronger national government. Persuaded to re-enter public life, Washington was unanimously elected to preside over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787. While he participated little in the debates, his dignified and respected presence lent immense legitimacy to the proceedings. He guided the delegates through contentious arguments, his leadership ensuring that the effort to create a more perfect union would not collapse under the weight of competing interests. The result was the United States Constitution, a revolutionary blueprint for a federal republic. Once the Constitution was ratified, there was only one man the nation would trust to serve as its first chief executive. In 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected by the Electoral College as the first president of the United States, a feat never to be repeated. He accepted the call to service, once again sacrificing his private desires for the public good, to embark on the unprecedented task of turning the words of the Constitution into a functioning government. As the first president, every action Washington took set a precedent for the future of the office and the nation. He took the oath of office on April 30th, 1789, in New York City, the nation's temporary capital. His 2 terms in office were foundational, a period in which he navigated the treacherous waters of domestic politics and foreign entanglements. He established the first presidential cabinet, bringing together brilliant but often conflicting minds like Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, whose ideological clashes would give rise to the nation's first political parties. Under his leadership, the federal government was established, the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution, and a national financial system was created under Hamilton's guidance, which included the assumption of state debts and the chartering of a national bank. Washington personally led troops to quell the Whiskey Rebellion, demonstrating the power and resolve of the new federal government to enforce its laws. In foreign policy, he skillfully steered the young nation away from the vortex of the French Revolution and the ensuing wars in Europe, issuing the Proclamation of Neutrality in 1793. This policy of non-intervention was a cornerstone of his statecraft, designed to give the fragile republic time to mature and strengthen without being drawn into destructive foreign conflicts. His presidency was a masterclass in leadership, balancing competing factions, establishing national authority, and charting a course for the nation's survival and future prosperity. In 1796, weary from decades of public service and concerned about the precedent of indefinite rule, Washington made the momentous decision to step down after 2 terms. In doing so, he established another enduring tradition for the American presidency. He conveyed his final thoughts to the American people in his farewell address, a seminal document in American political thought. In it, he warned against the dangers of political factionalism, arguing that partisan strife threatened to distract from the public good and open the door to foreign influence. He also passionately advocated for a foreign policy of neutrality, cautioning against permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. The address was a distillation of the wisdom he had gained over a lifetime of service, a final gift to the nation he loved. He returned to his beloved Mount Vernon, resuming the life of a planter and entrepreneur. But his retirement was brief. On December 14, 1799, after contracting a severe throat infection, George Washington died at his home. The news of his death plunged the nation and the world into mourning. In his eulogy, Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee famously memorialized him as first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. Washington's legacy is immense and complex. He was the indispensable leader of the Revolution, the steady hand that guided the creation of the Republic, and the president who set the standard for all who would follow. He was a man of his time, a slaveholder whose life reflects the profound contradictions of the nation's founding, yet his contributions to the cause of liberty and self-government are undeniable. His story remains a cornerstone of the American epic, a timeless narrative of leadership, sacrifice, and the enduring struggle to forge a nation conceived in liberty.